everybody. Welcome to another edition of Southern Shadows and Dust. Today we're at Traveler'S Cemetery, just north of Flomaton on Upper Creek Road, and we're going to take a look at some old historical graves and just take a quick overview of this area. So let's go. Traveler's Rest is a scenic, older cemetery right off of Upper Creek Road, north of Flomaton, Alabama. It's the place where many Emmons, Boutwells, Lambeths, Moys, Burkitts, Emmons, and others are buried here. I think I mentioned Emmons twice, but there are different sets of Emmons, and this is a very interesting place. We're going to take a look at some of these. Alan L Driscoll, born May 14th, 1890, died March 23rd, 1976. Lena Driscoll, April 7th, 1906, July 1st, 1981. A loving mother, may she rest in peace. Those are my Driscoll grandparents, and a relative of my grandmother's, Private Will Emmons, Florida. He's a World War I veteran, and he died April 26, 1928. I pulled his service record one time from the archives, and he was in some very serious battles in the First World War, which may have contributed to his early demise. He died roughly 10 years after the war. This is the grave of Rhodey Emmons and Ethel Boatwright Emmons. They lived approximately about where Flomaton Dragway was located. He had a trailer over there for years, a mobile home. Rhodey was a really good family historian. He remembered a lot of family history and could tell you a lot of really interesting stories. This is another relative of theirs, Riley Emmons. And then Rhodey's parents, and my grandmother Emmons' parents, Grandma Driscoll's parents, Annie Lydia Emmons, born 1878. She actually died in the 1950s. And Rhodey, 1874 to 1915. He died of stomach cancer. And that left his widow, Annie Lydia Emmons, to have to work really hard. It was an age before public assistance. She worked the fields, she picked cotton, she did whatever she had to do to provide for her family. And she married George Washington Emmons, who was a Confederate veteran, and she cared for him for the remainder of his life, and then she drew his Confederate pension upon his death. Her son Rhodey used to tell the story of sitting in the lap of George Washington Emmons while the rest of the family picked cotton and worked in the field, and how he remembered the older gentleman had a beard that stretched down to his waist, and but he was also known as Shanghai Emmons, and I'm not sure how George Washington Emmons got that name, but that was his nickname. Bob Emmons, who was probably the father of Rhodey Sr. here, story goes that he kept and raised gopher turtles as a hobby, and that they knew his voice, and they would come out of the ground when they heard him come out into the area where he kept them. And his wife was Polly Emmons. Some other notable graves in the cemetery, and there are several, probably more than we'll cover today, but we'll do a second round at a later date. Here's an interesting stone. It says, in memory of Margaret and Jess Emmons, who reserved cemetery property June 11th, 1904. And that was they were taking space here, so that kind of tells you about how far back the cemetery goes to some degree, although there's graves out here that are much older than that. There's Maggie E. Emmons, and here's a grave of Jess Emmons, or a descendant of his, or it's kind of hard to read that headstone, the shape it's in. The Atmore Advance from May 3rd, 1928 reference to Jess Emmons, his passing, In the canoe news section, it says that en route to Atmore from Flomaton on Wednesday morning, Jess Emmons, a lifelong Flomaton resident, died of heart failure. The attack came as he was near Waubee, and he died before reaching Dr. Clark Hill's office at Canoe, and that would have been on Hill Street in Canoe. Mr. Emmons is well known throughout this part of the state as he was a leader among the piling and tie dealers. All who knew him gave him the name of a fair dealer. Surviving Mr. Emmons are his wife, who was in Mobile, one son and 5 daughters. The Watson undertakers of Flomaton have charge of the body. Other people, family that's here is, like I mentioned, many Emmonses are buried here. And Jordans, I would point out James L. Jordan, who was born May 10th, 1846 and died November 23rd, 1920. He was also a county commissioner in Escambia County, and he was also a Confederate veteran. He was in Company 1 of the 1st Florida Infantry, CSA. His wife, Sarah, predeceased him by about 10 years, and she was an Emmons. She was actually related to George Washington Emmons. More recent grave sites is Millard Ray Boutwell, U.S. Air Force, Korea, 1937 to 2021, passed on his birthday. More Boutwell graves. Lizzie Conway, March 15th, 1898 to August 16th, 1927. Coming to this cemetery as a child, one thing that always struck me was the large number of infant graves that were here. And these markers these days are taking such a pounding, these older ones, from acid rain and the pH and the rain, that they're becoming very hard to read. This one here is almost impossible to read. Died January 21st, 1902. Another infant grave of the Nobles family. Born and died August 11th, 1905. Gone so soon. There's many others out here that tell of a similar story. Here is one of the descendants of Abraham Emmons. He was one of the patriarch Emmons of this area. Now, Abraham Emmons and wife, one time they had 2 above ground tombs for them that had a wrought iron fence around it. And to me, that was always what really stuck out about this cemetery, but at some point they changed that, and this actually says William H. Emmons, 1823 to 1907. It's really hard to make out because it's starting to fade away. And his wife, Didymy Emmons, born April 26, 1827 until April 30th, 1903. always been a really quiet cemetery, and come here, there's a lot you could see and take in. And, it's really well maintained. The trustees do a good job of keeping, the trustees of the cemetery keeping it well taken care of. Now here's another Robert Emmons, died March 31st, 1914, age 87 years. And Sarah Emmons died June 30th, 1914, aged 80 years. So there's several Brocks in this cemetery as well. Marvin Brock, George Brock. This is their plot. Marvin Brock being a World War II veteran, U.S. Navy, World War II, April 18th, 1926 until May 7th, 1946, 26 to 46. So if you find yourself on Upper Creek Road, you can stop and take a walk through this cemetery and check out the graves and the scenery and the peacefulness. It's always interesting to compare in the old newspapers the lives of people that you come across their headstones and kind of get the day-to-day history on what they were doing years before. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you on the next episode of Southern Shadows and Dust.